Thank you, Victoria. And it's so lovely to be a part of Lid again this year. And thank you all for joining us today for this talk, Creating Meaningful Goodbyes in a Changing Landscape. And it's so lovely to see so many of you here from all around the world. I'm Amanda, I'm co-founder of White Balloon. I'm here today with my colleague and co-founder, Tracy Norris. In recent years, as many of you will know, funerals and how we say goodbye has changed immensely to reflect the diverse beliefs, values, and wishes of individuals and families. And alongside traditional funerals with their wonderful ceremonies and rituals, we've seen a growing interest in more unique funerals and celebrations of life, greener funeral choices, including natural burials, living funerals, direct cremations, and also heartfelt ways to honour and commemorate a loved one. But with choice, which is a positive thing, there can also be uncertainty and confusion. And we believe the most important thing is clarity so that everyone can make informed choices that feel right for them and those they love. And that was why we created White Balloon. So we're really delighted to have brought together today a panel of experts in their fields, John Adams, Katie Costello, Jess May, and Dr. Bill Webster. And as Victoria said, sadly, Holly can't be with us today. And they're going to share with us their own thoughts and insights about the landscape of funerals today and of the future. And we're going to be hearing from them and asking them questions one at a time in alphabetical order by surname. So we'll be starting with John Adams. So hi, John. I'll just do a quick introduction. As many of you know, John is a fourth generation funeral director. He's past president of the National Association of Funeral Directors. He's an author. He's host of the wonderful podcast, Death, A Changing Industry. He's successfully campaigned to include bereavement education within the national curriculum in the UK. And he now shares his message on stages around the world. And John's committed to breaking the silence around death, dying and grief. John, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, and the way, as you know, the way we say goodbye is constantly evolving, but it feels like the pace of change has accelerated in the past 10 years or so, partly because of COVID. From your own experience, what shifts do you feel have had the biggest impact on the way we approach funerals today?
There's a lot to unpack there, really.
Yeah,
So can you all hear me okay? Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, good. Yeah, lot to unpack. So obviously, what is a funeral is a question to explore. For me, a funeral and the importance of a funeral is that gathering of people. It's that being a community to grieve together, to say goodbye. I think that's very important. That's been done for generations. And even animals will do that as well. So there is an importance in that. We talk about the changes that we're seeing in society. There is a rise now in unattended direct cremation, where there is no funeral service, no gathering of people, a lot of people will say that the ceremony will take place afterwards with the ashes, but the data suggests that the vast majority of the time that isn't happening. The intention might be to have that gathering of people afterwards, but again, majority of the time it's not happening. So for me, education, information is trying to show people what is possible. There are so many things that can be done. It requires creativity. It requires exploring how to make a funeral service or that gathering personal. The issue we have is we're discussing something and we're looking at something that someone doesn't want to do. Death scares people. People don't. A lot of people are terrified of the thought of themselves dying. They don't want their loved ones to die, and we all understand that. We all know that. But however, I have a different view where I think if we take control of that thought, we actually fill these gaps and grey areas with information, an opportunity of connection. I think not only will we have an opportunity to move forward with our grief in a better way, I think the outcome is actually we live better lives with more gratitude, more compassion and kindness and care for each other. There's simple acts of kindness, which I worry, can be missed in our communities. So I think we need to get back to basics. And what we're seeing is large online companies spending vast amounts of money. We're talking millions and millions of pounds, 9 million, I believe it was, in the first quarter of this year for TV advertisements, and very much basing and focusing on the how a funeral service, you don't have to have one, and to take the difficulty out of arranging a funeral. So there's lots to unpack there, and there's not a simple answer to it because there's so many different areas to it. I think the key part is of letting people know what is possible. And to give you an example of this, I'm looking after a family next week. Their family opted for a pure cremation, and they got in touch with me there to say, how can you help us, John? Their mother was too traumatized, and actually just, yeah, pure cremation, they'll sort it out for us. And now they're coming to our chapel arrest the day before the unattended direct cremation and going to have time in the chapel arrest. It was going to be a closed coffin. Now it's going to be an open coffin. Again, this is not me influencing them. This is me showing them what is possible. Now they're bringing in personal items to place into his coffin. They're going to read a prayer in our chapel. On the day of the unattended direct cremation, the following day next week, the grandsons are going to come down to carry his coffin and lift his coffin onto our ambulance, not a hearse. They don't want a hearse, they want an ambulance. And again, there's a belief that I have that even feeling the weight of that coffin for the grandchildren, there is something in that. There is that connection which is made. So for me, that will help them move forward with their grief. They are acknowledging what is happening, and yes, it's going to be difficult, but that difficulty is very, very important, and that's what I believe, and I hope many people share that view. That is what allows us to move forward in the best possible way.
Yeah, and you're right, John. It's all about so important open conversations and letting people know what the choices are. And yeah, and funeral directors, they play such an important role in society. How do you find that how do you find that balance between preserving valued traditions and practices and embracing changes that make sort of funerals more relevant today?
Yeah. So I struggle with this because there is a big perception out there about traditional funeral directors versus alternative funeral directors, and we hear these buzzwords. However, I think we are moving into a world now where we need to reconsider how we identify with groups. And I think because I'm sat in a black hearse, which is shiny, and I wear a top hat, and I'm fourth generation, so being fourth generations, it's a privilege to be fourth generation funeral director, having that history behind me. But actually, what you do in the future, I think, is more important. But the history obviously is wonderful. But from a traditional point of view, am I perceived as traditional because I wear a top hat and I have a cane? I will adapt to what anyone needs. My father would call himself traditional, but
Mm,
actually, he was doing home burials 35 years ago
yeah.
in a woolen coffin. So I think we need to look at that about what is traditional. What does it mean to be traditional? What does it mean to be alternative? For me, I'm quite a simple man. For me, it's like, are you good? Do you want to help me? Do you want to adapt your services to meet my needs? So, and I think that's not about traditional, that's about education. I carried out an exercise around 8 or 9 years ago where we got some information gathering about which funeral directors would allow bereaved people in a mortuary, and out of probably 99% of funeral directors said that you're not allowed in the mortuary for a bereaved person, and it wasn't stated why, but there just wasn't the thing to do. But actually, it's about education and information and moving forward. It wasn't done because that's not the done thing. But actually, it should be an opportunity for families to come to help prepare their loved ones. So I don't think anyone's against these movements. It's about educating and showing people what is possible and actually how it's going to help the bereaved. So yeah, I think it's not a clear answer of traditional versus alternative. It's about looking deeper into how you adapt your services. Interestingly, one last point to make as well. So on my courses that I teach, we talk about client care. What does client care actually mean? And how far would you go with your care for a bereaved person? And back to my dad again. And in the class, they say, "Oh, we'll do this. We'll do whatever you want." And I said to my dad, and my he's wonderful. The things that he's done, he's come in at midnight to place a mobile phone next to a deceased person's ear so someone could speak to them. And he would go above and beyond. I said to him, "Where's your line, Dad, of care?" He said, I haven't got one. I said, "You sure you haven't got a line of care?" And I said, "Would you dress up in a Star Wars outfit in front of a hearse, Dad?" He said, "I wouldn't do that." So they'd say, "You have got a line, Dad. You have got a line." The point is, though, it's like we are all. Where is our line? and what does care mean to us? And by the way, that answer, many funeral directors will wear a Star Wars outfit. It's interesting to understand what his line was. Um, so yeah, I think it comes back to care, back to the basic principles of what we are here for, how we serve somebody, how we adapt, how we listen. We need to understand about the person that's died. We need to understand what their passions were, what they were interested in, the dynamics of the family. Once we start to understand and listen and learn, then we can then provide suggestions that work for the bereaved. And that's what I've seen as the most beautiful thing in what we do is when we truly empower the bereaved to take ownership of their loved one. And I'll give you one quick example of that. And that'll be what we're doing next week with that unattended direct cremation. So the possibility of them having a pure cremation, having no contact at all, but with the ashes afterwards, which everyone tells me. But now that they're going to be there now when the coffin's closed for the last time, they'll be the last person to see their person. They'll be able to give their dad a kiss on the forehead, like, and say goodbye and that contact. So for me, that's the future. And actually, the future is very, very simple. It's very simple. It's about connection. It's about understanding why we're here, and how we can truly serve someone to allow them to move forward in the best possible way. So.
Yeah, thank you, John. And one of the things we've loved about White Balloon is meeting so many incredible people who work in this sector, and in particular the funeral directors who care deeply and they go above and beyond to be there for families at the most difficult time of their lives, and they're there 24/7, every day of the year. So yeah, thank you to all the funeral directors that do that incredible job.
And just on that as well, I say, things that I do. There's funeral directors all over the country, and what I'm seeing now as well. I was over in Sydney in September, and again, it's not. I thought there was great funeral directors in this country, all over the world. There's great service and great care throughout. My granddad, who died when I was president of NEFD that year, he passed away. His values were very much aligned to mine. He was there to serve people in the best possible way. With education, though, that's how we move forwards. That doesn't mean that I'm better than him. It just means it's moving forward, and it's about being educated about what is possible. How can we do things to help people? And that isn't about having a gold-plated coffin. That's about creating opportunities and facilitating space for people to move forward with that grief.
Thank you, John. Yeah, thank you for sharing that with us. And yes, I think actually we'll do questions at the end. So I'll hand over to Tracy, who's now going to ask the next questions. Thank you, John. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Manta.
Hello there. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. And as Amanda said, if anyone has questions for John or any of our speakers, put them in the chat. We'll have time at the end. And I know, John, you've been doing some traveling recently. If we have time, it'd be really good maybe to hear at the end about what you've seen overseas and any of the ideas that you think we could bring back here or incorporate here. So yes, we can always come back to that later. Yeah.
I have done a piece for your blog, haven't I, about this, about
we've got a blog,
my discovery of actually of what I've found on my travels, which is very interesting. Thank you.
I was going to ask you another question about that, but I thought actually best do it at the end.
Yeah. So Katie, welcome. Lovely to see you. Bit about Katie first, for those who don't know her. She's an award-winning soul midwife, funeral celebrant, and educator. She's a mentor, coach, and consultant, and public speaker, and provides a wide range of services, professionals, and organisations in this space. Katie's mission is to support the dying, honour the dead, and educate the living, and that informs everything she does. So welcome today, Katie. So as a funeral celebrant with many, many years experience, what kind of ceremonies are you seeing that people are drawn to today? And how do you think those choices reflect how people want to say goodbye? I know you spend a lot of time with your people who come to you, so you probably hear very clearly the types of things they want. So we're just interested to hear a little bit about that.
Oh, only a little bit.
A lot.
Anybody that knows me will know that I'm very excited to be here, and I've probably got a lot to say. But First of all, thank you guys for doing this and thank you for having us all on. This is absolutely brilliant. And thank you to everybody here for coming along and wanting to hear us all. I was going to say waffle on, but me waffle and hear everybody else talk. Um, okay, so when it comes to ceremony, I think if we look at modern day, the things that I'm noticing, actually, and there was so much of what John said, which, well, everything of what John said, I agree with. But I think people are drawn to at least exploring other ideas because there are more conversations about death and dying out there now. There is more about like John mentioned alternative kind of funeral directors. There's more conversations about shopping around. So I think we are expanding our mindset and we are becoming a bit braver maybe with it kind of exploring how we can do things differently. I think with all the talk, and that's a scary figure to think that some of the big corporates are putting that much money into TV advertising when, hey, maybe they could put it into hospices. Anyway,
Mm.
that's a whole other conversation. Um, but I think, because there is that there's just so much talk, we are thinking about things like direct cremation, what that means. And the adverts try and make it sound all fluffy as if like we're doing somebody a favor, but the conversation isn't there about actually the impact of the ritual and our grief. So I think because of that, it is smacked in our faces more. So thankfully, we are paying more attention. So I think people are now thinking about ceremonies in a different way with this idea of maybe your person's not going to be there. So, for example, the last two conversations I've had, the last two people that have come to me to help with their service, which I've got one next Friday and another one the week after, one is in a pub and one is in a hotel. Both of those people have already been cremated. One of which hasn't, sorry, one has this week. So it's very much about they are aware that actually, well, this has happened, but I saw this thing on telly. This is where also social media is a blessing and a curse. People have seen so much on Instagram, people like all of us sharing what we do, being brave enough to have the conversations and put pictures out there and talk about the stuff that we do is empowering people to go, oh, hold on. Actually, I saw that somebody had this thing in a pub with this music and that person in a Star Wars outfit, for example, and it's giving people ideas. So I think the biggest thing that people are drawn to now is this idea of personalization. They're recognizing that actually it might just be the small things that people can do that will make a difference to either the service with a person there or even without with a direct cremation. I think with the conversations, what we're doing is giving people permission to explore different ideas. People are recognizing that actually it's not inappropriate or disrespectful if you do things differently. Because I think instinctively we're drawn to the type of ceremony that our family did before, that we know the local FD offers. And that's what's done because we've seen it on TV and films. I think we instinctively want to do that because we think that's how a funeral or farewell should be. But thanks to the other noise that we're starting to pay attention to, we are recognizing that actually it doesn't have to be that way. And I think what makes it easier for people is those little personalizations. It might seem a little bit too out there for somebody to think about having like a hugely themed funeral like you might do a wedding, Harry Potter theme. To some, that might seem a bit too far. But actually, if they know that they could just put a Hogwarts scarf on the coffin, if they recognise that actually it's okay to have the some Harry Potter picture on your order of service, it's those things I think that people are realising actually makes a huge difference. So I've got a service next week as well, where the gentleman was known for always having a hanky, and he was a bit of a character, and he would say to people, like, come on, let's blow your eyes and wipe. No, you should wipe your eyes and blow your nose, but he would blow your eyes and wipe your nose. He was a bit of a character. So they've ordered all these hankies to just go up and ruffle the coffin as they leave. And that has made the family, it's given them laughs. They feel like they're doing something that everybody's going to know because that's what he was always known for doing. And actually, every other part of the service is quite traditional. So it's just those little things. So I think, thankfully, because of the noise that we are all making, and actually every single person part of this incredible weekend has an interest in this world. It's people like us. You can all make a difference just by sharing stuff, sharing that you're here today, letting people know that there are these bunch of weird and wonderful people in the world that will talk to you about this stuff, that will help you. That's what's having that ripple effect on society. I don't know if I answered the question. I went completely off. I'm so sorry. I got very excited.
No, no.
Does that hopefully that makes sense? And also, sorry, just one more thing. When it
Yes.
comes to the kind of things that we're drawn to, because we're realizing that we can make the personalizations, we're recognizing that we can do things differently. We're also aware of what we can do for us, like for our grief. We're recognizing that actually, if our person didn't leave much instruction, if they weren't fussed, Like my dad always says things like, well, chuck me out with the bins, or oh, just chuck me off in a cardboard box, love, don't worry about it. So actually I might struggle to come up with some ideas, but I know he'd also be up for me doing what feels right for me. And this is also another big movement where I think we're looking at things being a bit more eco-friendly, more sustainable. We're going down the road of things like natural burials, using your own materials for shrouds, and all those kind of things. So I think we are also drawn to the kind of ceremonies that I think we would either want, or that we feel that we can connect to in a way that we feel like we're having a lasting impact on the world for our person, but also on our own grief.
Yes, and I think you can't, I mean, the comfort it gives people if they walk out of that funeral and they feel that felt like that my person, they come out with maybe a little smile. I went to a funeral this year where the lady had a huge number of scars, neck scars, and they just put a huge box by the door. And as everyone left, they said, if you want to take one, do, just to remember her. And it was just such a lovely touch.
How
So I think
lovely is
that's
that?
really
Yeah.
important. So, Katie, another strand, as well as your celebrancy, you're a deaf educator,
Mhm.
helping people to make choices ahead of time, giving them the information and space to make thoughtful choices. Why do you think these conversations are so important, and how can we encourage more people to have them? I know the Sun Life report, I think 50% of people don't know whether the person closest to them wants to be buried or cremated. 20% don't know anything about the type of funeral they want. So those conversations in advance are so important. So I'd love to hear your thoughts around that.
Oh God, this is where I could be here all day. I honestly can't stress enough to people the importance of having these conversations. Purely like the impact of not having them is
Mm.
devastating. And I think the biggest thing, people have this expectation or this worry, quite rightly, that it's going to be emotive, because it is. Death and grief and dying is the most emotive thing that we experience as human beings. So any conversation that might trigger that emotion, our brains are built to avoid all that stuff. We protect ourselves. But gosh, when I think about the conversations that I've been part of with people, that yes, it's been emotive, it's been challenging, it might be very heightened situation or experience. But my God, when that doesn't happen, it's a million times worse.
Mm.
So the emotion and the challenges that come from having those conversations, yes, are difficult. But I wish I could get through to people how much more difficult they are, or how much difficult it is when you're in that situation, you don't know where the hell to start, basically. So I think the importance of having these conversations, we've got to realize that we're not just having them. Yes, it's upsetting, but we have to realize the impact these conversations have later on. And this is what I think we just sometimes can't fathom. First of all, we need to not have them when we're there. End of life planning, and I say this a lot, end of life planning should not be done at end of life. We shouldn't be trying to have these important, maybe logistically practical conversations, maybe emotional choices. We shouldn't be doing it when we are smacked in the face with maybe pain, anger, stress, physical or mental. We shouldn't be trying to do it when we're already maybe starting to grieve. We should do these things now, just now over dinner, having a chat with your partner, having a cup of tea in the kitchen. You saw something in a movie last night, have a conversation about it. I always say to people as well, we don't have to have these conversations in a way that is morbid or spend hours and it being really heavy. It could be heavy, but it can be little snippets of heavy. Well, there's lots of hearts going up. Hopefully, everyone that means everyone's green. It can be little snippets of heavy, but oh my God, they create such a lightness afterwards. And again, I think we have to also shift our own mindset. We think we don't want to upset somebody. Equally, people that are dying will say to me, oh, I can't discuss it with my daughter, it will upset her. And the daughter's saying to me, oh, I can't discuss it with dad because, it's
Mm.
going to upset him. They're both feeling the exact same way. Just be upset together, because later on and down the line with that person's grief and his death, there's a lot more magic and peace being the word that can be found. And shift the mindset that you're actually giving each other a gift. It's the analogy I often use with people. You're not trying to poke somebody to upset them and make them angry. You might have to poke at somebody a little bit to let them realize how important it is to you that you know this information so you can fulfill their wishes. And then if it's you
Yeah.
that's dying, that's struggling, to be able to say, look, I want to give you the gift of knowing what to do with my body. Because there's also things, it's not just the before death, the funeral, there's the bit in between about after death care. And I know that Holly was going to touch on some of this, and this is part of our sacredness as soul midwives, is the work that we can do with somebody's physical body after death. There might be rituals to carry out. There's a lot to be said for ceremony. There's a lot that we can do and keep that connection with our person after they've died through washing of the body. It might be prayer. It might be facing the body in a certain direction. It might be having certain elements and materials and all of this stuff around us. It doesn't have to be a religious thing, but it might. It doesn't have to be a spiritual thing, but it might be. So all of those conversations need to happen because all of that has a huge impact on our grief later on down the line. That's essentially what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Have conversations because it will support your grief later. It won't take it away. It won't stop it. It will still be heavy. It will still be icky and messy and challenging. But my gosh, it will not come with that added layer of questions and regret that you don't need to add if you can just have the conversation sooner.
And I think that's right. And I think what you said is very true. It doesn't have to be one big momentous conversation. It can be a drip, drip, drip.
Yeah.
One day you talk about one little thing and then you build on it the next time so that it doesn't have that really sort of scary feeling. I think that's really important. It doesn't have to be, let's sit down and talk about this. It can be conversation in a car or, as you say, over a cup of tea. Really important.
Exactly.
Thank you, Katie. Well, we'll come back to you later. I'm sure people will have questions.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to Jess. Hello, Jess. Welcome. Really good to see you here. For those who don't know Jess, she's an award-winning funeral celebrant, a living funeral specialist, and you'll learn more about that from her. She helps people to create uplifting and vibrant occasions for people who are approaching death or for significant milestones in their lives, for memory loss. She's a passionate advocate for living funerals and has collaborated widely, both in the UK and abroad, to spread the word about creating ceremonies which are more about life than death. So Jess, welcome today. So living funerals, I think it's probably fair to say they've been popular in other countries, maybe the US, but in the UK, it's quite a new thing. So for those who aren't familiar with this concept, can you tell us what a living funeral is and what it involves?
I certainly can. Hello, everybody. It's so lovely to see you. And I'd love to just round of applause for my amazing colleagues and my lovely friend, Katie Costello. It's such a joy to be here. And thank you to White Balloon and Lifting the Lid. Living funerals are an opportunity for you to celebrate your life before you die, or for you to celebrate your people before they die. It's a chance for you to say thank you. It's a chance to I don't know, finish unfinished business, give presents of your favorite things. It's a way of explicitly acknowledging a person's end of life before they go, because so many people will say, I wish she had been here. I wish she had known. And so many other people will say, I don't want a funeral. I don't want everybody having a party without me. And I do not want other people saying nice things about me that I can't hear. So a living funeral is basically a celebration of life before you die. Very much a thing in America before it's coming here, the way we're always 10 years behind. And in Japan as well, in 1996, I'd say, it might have been a bit later, there was a woman there who was very keen for her children to prepare for her death, and she had a living funeral. You may be aware of Chris Hellenger from Copperfield. She was a young woman who died from breast cancer and started a whole campaign around cancer awareness. She had a living funeral very famously with the Vicar of Dibley. For those of you who don't know, it's a comedy character with Dawn French here in the UK who played a vicar, and she's very funny. And she came and did the thing that was like an actual funeral where they had this pretend priest at the front, and it was cabaret tables and champagne and lots of fun. But living funerals can be anything. They can be anything that reflect you and your life in much the same way that Katie was talking about, and John too. It's all about that whole thing of celebrating a person as they really are, their life, their joys, their loves. And in line with what John and Katie have been talking about and the rise of the direct cremation and this aggressive marketing, my response to that is very much the same as Katie and John. I believe and know that these things really, really matter. And I don't want people to do nothing. And we don't want people to have direct cremations not knowing that they can have something really healing, really important, really personal. My response is just the other side of that, is to try and encourage people who were saying, put me out with the bins. I don't want a funeral. It's a waste of money. I want my kids to have my money. I don't care because I'll be dead. Those people, if you say to them about living funerals, will say, well, now I wouldn't mind that. Now you're talking. And you can incorporate celebration and ritual and all of the things that Katie and John were talking about before you go. You will have people talking about having a party euphemistically before. And then I would say that I do think there is a distinct difference between a party and a living funeral, although I do think the term funeral is loaded. And as John and Katie were saying, there's a real thing around educating and around understanding what a thing is. Funeral is just all so complicated for people, and I'm realizing that people are much more comfortable with celebration, especially before they die. Does that answer your question, Tracy?
It does, and I think that thing around terminology is really important, and probably we need new words, and they will evolve, won't they? They'll come out of the woodwork, and we'll be using different words in 2 or 3 years' time, probably.
Funnily enough, I've been using legacy the way that John has been using legacy
Yeah.
celebrations. I'm trying
Yeah.
to trialing that. Yeah.
Yes. And that's the thing, is a funeral where you have the body present, is it not? We need new words, and I think that will come with time, which is great. And I've seen some of the lovely testimonials on your website, the benefits that people get from these living funerals. And it's interesting because it's not just for the person who may be dying, but it's all of their friends and family. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that, the benefits that you've found from these occasions.
I don't know how much time I have, and I'm aware that I don't want to cut Bill short, but I will
Another
give
few
you
minutes. Yeah, carry
another
on.
few minutes.
Yeah.
Oh, well, with those few minutes, the most precious thing I can do is share with you about Hazel, who we are calling Queen Hazel, who was having an 80th birthday party. And instead of her having a party, we went and we had a celebration for her. And I turned up, she actually was living with dementia, and her family wanted to gather her stories before she died. And I went to her and met her. It was up in Cheltenham, and I said, I'm here. Do you know why I'm here? No, she said. I said, I'm here to celebrate you and your life, and your children have asked me to come and do that with you. And she went, me? You're here to celebrate me? And I said, yeah. She said, they paid you to be here to do that. I was like, yes. And she's wearing a little crown. Anyway, long story short, we had champagne at the beginning. Everybody brought her favorite food, her favorite flowers. There were a lot of chocolate buttons. And we had a toast, and then we started with looking at her photo albums and sitting around having snacks, looking at all the stories. And then we sat and shared all the stories together in a circle. We were in the residence lounge at her residential home. So you can do these things anywhere. And I especially think that's important. You don't have to go to a big venue or an expensive venue or somewhere that you can't get to because you're immobile. If you are in hospice care, palliative care, anywhere, you can do that. So we did that, and then we had a little moment of remembrance for her daughter who had died. And then everybody just carried on with the stories. And then we played Mamma Mia very loudly, Neil Diamond very loudly. Everybody danced. Everybody sang because obviously she had remembered the words, because we all know with dementia, music stays with us. And everybody danced with it all. And she had a bit of a cry with Neil Diamond. And then we finished it all off in the garden, chatting and having food. And then I took away those stories to create a living legacy book that they can then use if they want to have a celebration afterwards. And I think one of the questions was, would you have another funeral afterwards? You can do. And if you've got that book and you've done all that preparatory work, you can then give that book to a celebrant and they can use that as a eulogy. That's as quickly as I can do it. It's killing me not to say more. I'm like Katie, I could go on and on.
Yeah, but I'm just sitting here smiling, and I think that says everything about it. Well, about you and about what you do. It's wonderful.
It's the most rewarding thing I've ever done, and I've done celebrations since 2013. I've been doing ceremonies since 2013, and I can honestly say that was the most rewarding thing I ever did. She loved it. I've never seen someone smile, and the children loved it. And the one last thing I will say is the first thing she said was, she couldn't remember herself. She didn't know what the photographs were. And she said, look at my children. I am so proud of them. They're wonderful. And they had that, and they have that forever.
That's
Anyway,
lovely.
I'll shut up now.
Thank you, Jess. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand over to Amanda now.
Thank you. And our final and last speaker today is Dr. Bill Webster. Bill, thank you for joining us today. So Bill is a grief counsellor, he's an author, he's a renowned international speaker, and he's joined us all the way from Canada today. So thank you, Bill. And he combines his personal experience with academic education, years of practical application of his work, his warmth and sense of humour to share his message. So Bill, yeah, thank you for joining us today. And you've spoken previously about the importance of having some kind of ritual or ceremony alongside a direct cremation. Would you be happy sharing your story with us and why you feel finding meaningful ways to say goodbye really matters?
Well, thank you very much. And it's a real privilege to be here. And I wish I could disagree with someone and get a real discussion going, but I've absolutely loved all of the presentations, and thank you all very, very much. It's an honor to be a part of this. I come from a slightly different angle on this because I'm a grief counselor and I deal with people after the death or after the loss or whatever. But I have some very close connections with the funeral industry. I became a grief counselor after my wife died in 1983. I was a single dad for 10 years. And I went back to university and did my doctorate to become a grief counselor when there were no grief counselors. That's what got me into this. I got no help, no support, no anything. So I'd been a grief counselor for 35 years, an author, traveling around, doing talks, the expert. And in 2018, my son died in an accident. And I want to tell you, grief counselor or no grief counselor, it knocked the legs right out from under me. Sorry, I bumped the microphone. I was completely devastated by it. You see, it's one thing to know it in theory. It's quite another to experience it. Now, Steve suffered a brain injury in an accident many, many miles away from his home and my home. And he was transported to a center in a city in British Columbia. And he was there for 3 weeks until he finally succumbed to his injuries. So what to do? We were miles away from his home. We were miles away from my home. And we felt that the most practical solution was to have direct cremation. However, it was very important to me that be done properly. I wanted my son's body treated with dignity. I didn't want him in the hands of a stranger for whom this was just another anonymous body. So I knew a funeral director in that city, and he arranged for cremation to take place. We attended the thing, but we didn't have an actual ceremony at that time. And then after I collected his remains, and we had 2 celebrations of life. One in his hometown at his golf club, where all of his friends, he was a forest firefighter, he was a helicopter pilot, he was an outdoorsman, and he had lots of friends. And it was wonderful because they came and told stories about Steve, and it was great for me to hear all these. Some of them I was glad I didn't know them before because, he was quite an adventurer. But it was wonderful. The bar bill was enormous, but it didn't matter. But then we came back to my hometown. I brought the urn with me, and we had a more traditional service where my friends and the people that I'd helped through grief and other family members came, and we had these 2 ceremonies. You see, I come at this from the opposite angle. I'm a grief counselor. I mean, John is a dear friend of mine, and we've cooperated on many things. The difficulty is, I think, and you're welcome to disagree with me, is I know John. He's a wonderful guy. I have many friends in the funeral industry, but the perception out there of funeral directors, we touched on it using the words, is that, well, maybe it's too expensive and all this kind of stuff. Well, that's actually a myth. But I come at it from the other angle, because what I'm concerned about is what happens to people after if there is no ceremony. We are talking about rituals. What is a ritual? I have a definition of a ritual. and I think you'll all appreciate it. A ritual is something you do when you don't know what to do. And when someone dies, especially when it's you know, an unexpected or an unanticipated death, we don't know what to do. So I believe every grieving person has thoughts about their loved one. Everybody's thinking about them. They can't get them out of their mind. It's on their mind constantly. And as a grief counselor, I see this all the time. Thoughts lead to emotions. Have you attended a funeral where there's maybe someone doing a eulogy and they start and they say, well, I'd like to say something about, and all of a sudden the emotions come up. Thoughts lead to emotions. But there's a third element that I think is often missing in the direct unattended cremations, and that is actions. Because thoughts and feelings are only reconciled in actions. And that's where the ritual comes in. A ritual is something you do when you don't know what to do. So we were faced with a very difficult decision, but the word that I really wanted to emphasize with my son's cremation and his the ceremonies afterwards was the word dignity. I think it has to be done with dignity. And I would like to say, I know many funeral directors in Britain and in Canada who will do direct cremations with dignity. And John described it. And I think it was it's a great and wonderful service that's happening. I think John's absolutely right. I'm only going to say that twice, John. But you know, education. We need to start by educating people. And the first thing is, and I agreed with the other speakers, we have to start the conversation. I think you know, Simon Sinek, who's a business guru these days, always starts with the question, why? Why do we need to talk about it? And it's because if we don't talk about it, then someone makes a decision, you know, and as the person dies or after they die, oh, they had a plan to do this, but funerals are for the living, not for the dead. They're about the dead, but they're not for the dead. They're there to give people an opportunity to express their grief and to receive support. And I think I agree entirely with everyone that we really need to do that. And here's the reason why. In the grief counseling field, we're seeing a phenomenon called prolonged grief disorder. And what we're seeing in our grief groups is 6 months after the direct cremation, a year after, people are saying, we wish we'd done something different. We wish we'd done something. We wish we'd done anything. And I think it's very important because what we're trying to do in our support groups is adding an element of a ritual to say goodbye, a meaningful goodbye, a final farewell. Because psychologically, if people don't have the opportunity to have a final farewell, they're going to be struggling with it. And they're going to struggle with guilt and all that kind of stuff that we all know. And so I think it's very important because really, I think the real question that all of us have to address is this. How do we encourage people to start the conversation? Anything that is mentionable is manageable. And it's the why followed by the how. Can we create some kind of a tool to encourage people to talk about these kinds of things? Because there's a conspiracy of silence around it. So I like the idea of new words. I like the idea of legacy. All these are great concepts. And if we can put all this together, I think we'll change the world.
Wonderful, Bill. And thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And Bill, honouring remembering loved one doesn't end with the funeral. Can you talk to us a bit about continuing bonds and how you feel this can help with the bereavement journey?
Well, absolutely. There are, of course, many different theories of grief. You know, we know Kubler-Ross and tasks of mourning and all of these things. And I think one of the things that I've noticed is that all of these systems, which are very helpful, no criticism intended, but they all end up with words like acceptance and letting go. And these kinds of, you come to a final stage, you say, well, that's it, it's over, off we go. That's not happening. It doesn't happen. I will never forget my son. I will never stop thinking about him. I could turn my camera around. I've got about half a dozen pictures here right in my office. You know, I talk to him. But, you know, you have to be careful here. So the theory of continuing bonds was actually created in 1996 in a book called Continuing Bonds, A New Understanding of Grief. And I think it really opened up a whole different concept to say that we have an ongoing relationship with the deceased. We'll never forget them. But I think we have to be careful, because while I think it's helpful to people to say we don't just close the door and forget about it and these kinds of things, you know, I have a significant birthday tomorrow. And those of you who say, is it 50? I'll send a free book to you. It's not 50, but that's another story. Anyhow, we're going to have a toast for my son tomorrow at my birthday, right? My boys were all Scorpios, the 1st, the 8th, and the 15th of November. So last Saturday, I just had a quiet day. I was thinking about him all day and, you know, and going over things, looking at photographs and stuff. I will never forget him. He will always be a part of my life. But here's the danger with the theory of continuing bonds. I spoke to a lady not too long ago who came to one of my groups, and she said, I keep my husband's ashes on the mantle. And on Saturday afternoons, it was actually a Canadian lady. It was a hockey game, which happens on Saturday night. But I'll use the English equivalent. On Saturday afternoon, I get the urn and sit it beside me on the settee, and we watch the football match. Well, what's wrong with that picture? You know, because she feels that she and her husband are watching the football match. He's dead. He's gone. And though she may still have his presence, here's the distinction, ladies and gentlemen. I sense my son's presence, especially when I talk to his daughter, who's now 11, and you know it's wonderful. She is him reborn, and I don't mean that in a religious way, but you know her personality and so on. It's exciting. But here's the distinction. Well, let me in fact use a different example. My wife died in 1983, and I've written books on that loss and so on. I was 10 years on my own, bringing up my boys, and then I remarried Joanna. I didn't remarry. I married Joanna. I remarried. I got to get this straight. I'll get myself in real trouble. But so Joanna lets me go and talk to people about how I lost my wife. I talk about Carolyn and how we met and what happened and all that kind of thing. So, wow, she must be a wonderful woman to do it. No, here's the difference. I have a relationship with Carolyn, but it's a relationship of memory. Whereas with Joanna, I have a relationship of presence. Carolyn will always be a part of my past. Steve will always be a part of my past, but he's no longer in my present. And I think the importance of a ritual, a farewell, if you like, is to be able to say, you know, we're saying goodbye. We'll never forget you. We'll always have a relationship of memory, but you're not here. You're not in the present, and we can't keep it. There was an ad in the Vancouver newspaper some years ago now that said that Mom and Dad always wanted to take a world cruise, but they never had the opportunity. If anyone would be willing to take their ashes around the world, and people are willing to pay them to do that. I mean, I would have volunteered for a start, but, you know, I'd like to take a cruise around the world, but I'd like to do it while I'm living and while I can enjoy it, you see? So you have to say, well, what's wrong with that picture? It's unresolved grief. And I think the continuing bonds is a wonderful theory. I think it works very, very well if used in the right way. And that's a distinction that I make. I hope I've clarified that for you.
You have, thank you very much. And I recently attended a talk at one of Greenacre's wonderful remembrance parks, and Bill, spoke very yeah, incredibly then and very inspiringly. And I know you think you're coming back again next year, I think, aren't you, for some more
I'm
talk?
looking forward to it. And may I say, I was tremendously impressed by the natural burial grounds that are there, and I know there are others around the country, and I think it's a wonderful way to celebrate a person's life.
Yeah. Oh, well, Bill, thank you so much for
My
sharing.
pleasure, Amanda. It's good to see you again.
Really interesting and points there. And I'm sure we're going to have lots of questions for you all. I'll pass over to Victoria. She's going to read through the questions in the chat. And then if any of you want to ask the questions yourself, just put your hand up or flag up one of the hands on your computer, and yeah, we'll ask the questions. So Victoria, I'll hand over to you.
Of course. Thank you, and thank you, everyone. There's a question for John at first. Can you share a list? This is from Lisa Henke. I'm going to pronounce that wrong. I do apologise. Can you share a little more about traditional and alternative funeral homes? I'm familiar with Berlin's alternative death care culture, and apart from the needs-orientated, individualised approach you mentioned as well. Alternative funeral homes here also operate with a different business model than traditional ones. In short, they sell products at cost and are compensated for their services with an average hourly rate to avoid incentivizing themselves to oversell products. Sorry. Yeah,
I think I've got that. The gist of the question. Before I answer the question, just as Bill was talking, I was desperate to say just two things. Firstly, just to reinforce what Bill said about the ceremony, I was thinking about the healing that took place for the Queen when the Queen died, and all the people that gathered to see her coffin. The healing that took place throughout the nation and the world, having that time. What would have happened if the Queen said, "Well, I don't want that. It's not about you, it's about me." So like, that's a controversial comment to make, but there is an element of giving people that space and time. And then the other point was about education. And on the 15th of July, which I'm going to cover in my talk at 2:45, will be about the inclusion in the curriculum in England. So the education is coming, which is very exciting. But the question, though, regarding alternative and traditional funeral homes, so what I'm seeing, what I saw, and to touch on what Amanda and Tracy said about what I found and what I saw over in Australia, which ties into this answer, is the word experience. How you can give people the experience, and that's not some buzzword or business word. It's about how someone feels at a facility in that environment. So an example of this in Australia, I was very fortunate to go to a funeral home, Burstows, and they have a cremator in their funeral home, which again isn't that's not a strange thing to have in places like America, and Canada for Bill. But what I saw in Australia is the level, the detail. I've never seen anything like this. And the cremator, there was a viewing room which you have at crematoriums in the UK, so you can watch a coffin being placed into the cremator. Well, actually, they even built a small chapel, viewing facility area, very comfortable, huge, beautiful glass to look through. And even the cremator, how it was all designed in there, wasn't like industrial, it was very personal. And I was blown away by the level, to be honest with you. And that is about experience. They've got catering facilities there, and outside the catering facilities, they've got a playground for children. I was like, literally, the guy showing me around the place just kept looking at me, laughing. He's like, "You are like a child in a candy store." I was like, "I am. I can't. I'm just literally. I'm done. Sign out." So that for me, we talk about again traditional, alternative. It's very difficult to put it into a category. It's just striving towards providing the best level of service. Where I'm based in Bridgnorth, not far from Louise and Stourbridge, we do not have the space. And that's what they've got over there, which we haven't got. We don't have the space in this town. And like where we're based here, everyone knows us here. I haven't got space for more cars in the driveway, never mind a playground. I'd love to have space for playgrounds. But what we can do to be creative, and that's what all funeral directors can do, and people in this room, is collaboration. How we can work with people where there are facilities with a playground. There's Stockton House, not far from here, wedding venue. I'm going to see them soon about holding more funeral services there at the wedding venue, so we can have a funeral service there at a very, very low cost and have the unattended direct cremation the following day. So being creative, doing things now, be adaptable, be flexible, be agile. And I think that's the future. So when there's no space for playgrounds, we'll go and find some.
Good man.
Thank you, John. Thanks, John. We sort of I'm going to go to Katie. I think Katie wants to say something. We've got a couple of minutes.
No, I just wanted to just mention something that I spoke to Amanda about earlier, and actually John's just led me in really well. He used the word experience, and thank you so much to Bill as well for sharing your story. And I think you've just highlighted the importance of everything we said. You've just put it all so eloquently and summed it up brilliantly. So thank you. I think this is the thing with all of this conversation about types of ceremonies and choice, and whether it's living funerals, our experience of grief. It's that exactly what John said. It's the experience. I think we all need to try and be braver and think differently about what we want our experience of grief to be. It's going to suck. It's going to be hard. It's going to feel impossible. But there are things we can do now to support our experience of grief later on. And one big thing that both Bill touched on, and I know that Holly was going to touch on as well, and I mentioned it, is this idea of this sustainability and making greener choices. And I think when I think about the natural burials that I've supported, that is hugely supportive to people's grief, because they know that they've done something good alongside their grief. They know they've made a good conscious decision, maybe for themselves, for the person that's died. So I think it doesn't, yes, it's the personalization. Yes, it's or not taking the ashes. And yes, there's all of that stuff later on. But when it comes to the funeral, that is really where our experience starts. So if we can try and nurture ourselves through that by making those maybe better choices that we know might support our grief, whether it is an eco-friendly coffin, whether it is a different type of shroud, whether it's a natural burial ground, whether it's bells and whistles wherever else, I think that's the thing. We can start having the conversations if we recognise that we're doing ourselves a favour, essentially, and recognise that our experience of grief, we do have a certain level of control over, or a certain level of say in about how we experience that, and all of these different choices. So the eco thing I just wanted to highlight for Holly's behalf, because I know that on White Balloon as well, there's loads of more information about all of this. And that's the whole point of White Balloon. It's that hub where everything we've talked about, options, choices, it's all on there. And that's what's so great about White Balloon as a resource. So I just wanted to sort of tie that in there as well. So sorry, thank you.
No, thank you. Thanks. We've got literally a minute. I don't know if Louise, did you want to ask really quickly?
I know. Was there another question that we probably haven't got time.
There wasn't another. The only other question was my question, which Jess already answered.
Okay. I think I've literally got 60 seconds because I know we're on a very strict schedule and you have to move us out in a minute. But I think we could all talk all day about this, and there is so much to it. I think we haven't had a chance to talk about natural burials, some of the new technologies coming down the line, like water cremation. But I think the main thing is there are so many changes, direct cremation. So we need to talk, and we need to make sure everyone is having these conversations, and not just amongst ourselves, but taking them out into the community so people can make these choices that feel right for them. So I think we should all keep talking. Lifting the Lid does the most incredible job at encouraging this. And we can't thank you enough, Victoria, and for Joe behind the scenes, who has organised everything tirelessly. It's been incredible, and we're really looking forward to the next couple of days and all the other talks and activities. Yeah. So I think we've run out of time, but thank you everyone for coming. Thank you to our 4 panelists. You've been amazing. Amanda will join me in saying that. It's been really interesting. And I wish we had more time, is all I can say.
No, thank you. I'm just going to, because you mentioned I'm just going to pop in the chat about our Lifting the Lid GoFundMe. It's because obviously we love putting this on, but it is it's all run by volunteers, and Joe has just been doing all the production, and we just want to keep being able to do it. So if you can spare even a small amount of money, or go and buy something in our Lifting the Lid shop, and there's t-shirts like this and the links are there, so we just appreciate if you can, but thank you.
Thank you for all the speakers for joining us, and Bill, happy birthday for tomorrow.
Thank you.
Yeah, basically.